All right. Welcome everyone to the Flux Dev meeting. Today is the 14th of October. I don't think we have anyone new on the call, so we'll skip the introductions. We also don't have actions from last time, but we have Michael who's up for a demo. What are you going to show us today?
So I'm going to show the image automation walkthrough. I'm going to walk through that. It's quite a lot of preliminaries, but I won't walk through those bits. I'll just mention that I've done them. So let me screen share and try to get that right. A window. This one, I think, is the one I want. Okay, and okay, move that up there where I can see it. Okay, so just mention the things that. Well, actually, let me start with what is this. So this is the second design of image automation. The first one, which is still in there, you can choose between them. The first one is you just set up a policy for which images you want to update to, and then the automation just applies that to anything that uses it in your repo. So it's pretty, it's a bit of a sledgehammer. This version, this design is a bit more flexible. You can choose which things you update, and I will show you in a second how you actually choose those things. So the stuff I've already done before starting the demo is I set up a Git repository object. Actually, no, I haven't done that. Sorry, I've created the secrets and installed the CRDs for the Git repository, the source controller stuff. But I'm not actually running the source controller because I don't need it for this. But I've done all the secret stuff because that's quite boring and repetitive, and will be integrated into the command line thing at some point anyway. The difference between what you have to do and what the command line tool does now is that you need a writable deploy key, or a deploy key with write permissions. So that probably will become an option or something for the command line tool. Okay, so let me refer to my script. The other thing I've done is I've installed the other part of the image automation stuff. So there's two parts. One is the bit which I'm showing you now, which is the automation which makes commits to Git. The other part of it, which is another controller, is the reflector, which is the bit that goes and scans image registries, depending on what you tell it. So I've already got that running, and I'm just going to tell it to do stuff. So let's type something. So here is so this is an image repository object. This tells the reflector about a particular image repository. So here is where you would put credentials or refer to credentials, or how to get credentials at least, for scanning a particular repository so that the reflector can access it. But this particular image, Cuttlefax, doesn't need any authentication, so I haven't put that there. And anyway, it doesn't support it yet. So that's an image repository. This is a policy. So a policy just says which versions from a particular image you are interested in. So you see down the bottom there, it says policy semver range 1.0.x. So I'm interested in patches on the 1.0 minor version there. So let's apply those. hopefully they'll be happy with that. And we should also be able to okay, that's cool. So it's already gone and scanned the registry. There's only about 1 or 2 images in there, so it's already completed. And the policy is reflecting the fact that actually the latest version, according to that range, is 1.0.0. So there isn't a patch release, it's just 1.0.0. So that's cool, that's working so far. So that's the image reflector bit. Now I will show you how the automation bit works. So I'm just going to this is a Git repository. The definition, I think it's a v1 alpha 1. It's yet to be updated, but it's the same definition. It's the source controller definition. And this is just pointing to a repo I created for the sake of this demo. So we won't bother looking at that. Okay, so this is the bit where you tell it, this is how you tell it what to update. This is a deployment that's from that repo I just created. And if I spin down here to this image, see this comment at the end. That's a little JSON value. And this is referring to the image policy object that I just created before. So what it'll do, the automation will do, is look for these markers, look up the policy, and then get the latest image and replace the value in that field with the latest image. So I've artificially set this to use 0.9, but just so that it makes an actual change, and we'll be able to see the change. So, so that deployment is what is in Git at present. Now, the last thing we have to do is there is some automation to run. So this is an image update automation object. This is the one that the automation controller cares about. So you can see that it refers to the Git repository that I created. And that's all it needs to do, because the information of what to update is in that Git repository. There's some room there for telling it the committer. You can also supply a template, although at present there's not any variables that go into the template, but that's kind of room for expansion. And also potentially for committing to a different branch, say. But that's not required for parity with Flux v1, so it's sort of bumped to the next version, so let's say. Okay, so I'll create that. Okay, we can look at it, but probably won't have run because I'm not actually running the controller. So I'm just going to run the controller inline here so that we can see the logs more easily. It also means that it'll build it first, but hopefully that won't take too long. So this is where we see if the demo gods are smiling. Hopefully it'll do something apart from just log lots of stuff. No. Okay. Compile, compile, compile. Really hope Apple's going to put out some new laptops soon. This one's quite old. Okay, so found it cloned the Git repository. It made some updates. It pushed to commit. Okay, and then it grabbed it again, and there weren't any updates. That last log line there is says that it tried to update stuff, but there weren't any changes to make. So hopefully that means, if I change to here, so this is the repo that I set up that has the deployment and so on. So if we look at where's the deployment? Oh, so we see that it has indeed updated it. No smoke and mirrors, I promise you, to 1.0.0. So that was the latest version from the policy. And it's sort of surgically done it inline there without disturbing the comment, i.e. leaving the marker there, and without sort of rearranging anything else. Happy days. All right. So that's what that does. I have not set up a demo because I did this in the last 20 minutes, but I've also implemented recently setters so that you can tell it to just update or just use the tag of the latest image or just use the name of the latest image. So this is pretty useful for if you want to update a customization file, because you tend to separate those out. Also, it should work with Helm release objects. If you have the whole image there, or if you have just the tag, you can update that as well. The nice thing about this versus how Flux v1 does it is that it doesn't have to understand anything really about the YAML, because it just looks for those comments, and wherever as long as it has it looks a bit like a Kubernetes resource, it'll happily just update things in place without, it doesn't have to interpret what that thing is. It just looks for the field with the comment. So it's way more sort of generally applicable. We don't have to teach it about any particular custom resources or anything. It'll just work, which is pretty cool.
Can you show the Git diff?
Yeah. I'm still sharing, aren't I? Yeah. See that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this one's already been through the automation, so any kind of mysterious reformatting it would have done has already been done, but it's actually pretty good at preserving things like ordering and spacing and white space and stuff. Tries reasonably hard. It's a bit like kubeyaml. It's a bit like Flux v1's implementation. There are some cases where it'll sort of do a slight reformat, like re-indent something, but mostly it's pretty good. And of course, once something's been through automation, it'll it's idempotent from that point. It's a fixed point rather. Okay, let me stop presenting. The other good thing, I think Sean Egan asked, does this automate chart versions? And the answer is no, it doesn't, because it's just referring to images, but a very, very similar approach would work for charts as well. And it could probably even just look at Helm chart resources, which are already implemented, which would be quite neat. So there's a bunch of work. to do to this kind of the functionality is, I would say, is on a par with Flux v1, i.e. you could port things that deal with Flux v1 at present to work with this. The main thing now is actually making the image reflector controller able to use credentials and work well with ACR, ECR, GCR, all of those container registries. So there's a wee bit of, well, quite a bit of work to do, but most of it's pretty obvious, I think. Yeah, the end of the demo.
So if we want to add, for example, bucket support to the write back, doesn't mean that the image update will have to duplicate all the code in source controller, authentication, authorization, all the.
It shouldn't do. So, I mean, I would argue that it's not really worth doing bucket support, but the way it does Git support is to read the Git repo. It uses the code from source controller because that's in a package, so it just imports that. And if you remember, it was originally not exported, and I changed it to be exported so it could be used. To write back, obviously source controller doesn't do any making commits, so that's all code that lives in here. But in principle, it could be factored out. So the commit message templating and all the bits that aren't particular to it being an image update specifically could be factored out and put somewhere. And also you could write something that'll write back to you could write, a library or a bit of a library that'll push stuff back into a bucket, and that could be used as well in the same way. Yeah, I mean, it's in here because it doesn't exist anywhere else in GOTK at present, but it could be used for other stuff and factored out.
Yeah, one thing we are doing right now with after you bootstrap GOTK, you have to run all the create commands with export, write files to disk, then commit them manually. So I'm guessing if we get the write back code into a package, I don't know, under Flux CD packages or whatever, instead of export, we could do -- push or something like that. I need to
in principle, yeah.
Trim down a lot the get started guide and everything else.
I mean, that stuff to me, it sort of falls somewhere on a line of, are you trying to do too much magical stuff for the user, right? Because it's probably someone sitting there who knows how to use Git and knows what files they want and where they're going, like knows it's their repo, right? So arguably you should stop at just outputting the files, because then they can always say, Git status, what new files are there, add them, fine. So I'm kind of thinking, people know how to use Git. We don't need to do that for them. The place we need to do it is when it's running in the cluster in automation, because they're not present. It's unattended execution. But if it's someone sitting there and issuing commands, then I'm not going to tell them how to use Git. That's up to them. They might want to export the command, export the stuff, and then realize they want it in a PR, so switch branches and then add it.
Yeah, have you tried the manual bootstrap of the toolkit without?
Not for a while.
Or CLI?
Not for a while. Yeah, I mean, maybe because it does other stuff, like does it create a repo or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Keys,
so if you're doing that, then sure. Yeah.
You generate.
If you're already doing a lot of stuff like creating the repo, then sure.
Yeah. It does a
Or
bunch of things. And
it'd be nice to kind of lead people through it at least. And so maybe they have their own repo, but it'll just sort of set things up nicely in a nice file hierarchy or something, and push it, and then they can edit the commit message, but it gives them a default, or so yeah, for convenience, sure, it can lead. I think leading people through stuff is reasonable. I just wouldn't want to make that the only mode they can interact with it.
Yeah, I'm quite undecided on what we should do with the Bootstrap stuff. For example, I'm seeing a lot of issues with GitLab and so on. So maybe we should discuss dropping GitLab altogether from all the automation that we do. It's quite a weird SaaS thingy, GitLab. For example, someone today reported that the Bootstrap doesn't work because you can no longer list deploy keys. You have to be a GitHub employee to do that. If you are using the SaaS version, like, how crazy is that? So yeah, we'll have to discuss it at some point if we are going to support all these Git providers, or just write a very lengthy doc on how you can do the Bootstrap manually.
Yeah, it's not super difficult to do a lot of that stuff yourself, right? I mean, it's a bit of a pain maybe clicking through stuff, but if you're using, for instance, Hub for GitHub, then you can, Git init, Hub create. You just did that. You just created that Git repo. I don't know whether there's a similar thing for GitLab command line tool.
No.
There are people also, I think you've seen that issue, Stefan, with talking about setting up GoToK with Terraform and other automation tools. So it's like, we could write like this is how people do it with Terraform example. And that would also be enough as okay, yeah, even if I'm not using Terraform, I can look through the Terraform and I kind of duplicate that to something else.
Yeah, can Terraform import a Golang package?
In what way do you mean?
Like, Terraform is Go, right? Can you create a Terraform module that imports a Go package, some Go source code?
You can create providers.
Yeah, you can create providers. I've written a couple. So it's and there you basically have to just implement 4 commands. It's like basically CRUD. So it's like it deals with the state. You just have to be able to tell from the provider how to get, create, delete, and update a resource. And then it deals with the whole figuring out orders and things like that.
But it's the sort of thing where you wouldn't expect to have to create a provider, right? Because
no,
you should already be able to do stuff with whatever Git server in Terraform, and you should already be able to do stuff in Kubernetes. And if those are basically the 2 things you need.
Yeah, so it's like writing a module, for example, and it doesn't really have to be something that is maintained and works. I just think it's writing something that describes how to do things as code, instead of having a lengthy step-by-step, create this repository, get this deploy key. It's I'm just looking at how I'm going to use Flux V2 when I start deploying it at scale. It's basically going to be, I need to integrate this into my normal Terraform that I'm already running to set up clusters.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good point. A lot of people, their automation will go back further than having a Kubernetes cluster at all. So it's sort of convenient for lots of reasons to have something that will do what the toolkit Bootstrap does, but for lots of purposes actually you want it to be accessible programmatically.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I created a package called install, which is in the toolkit repo right now as an exported package. And it has all the options and everything needed to generate the toolkit manifest. And I was wondering if that can be imported in Terraform, and Terraform could pass all the install options to the generate command in Go. That will give you back an array of bytes with the manifest as you want them. Is your cluster on ARM64? Do you want Helm controller? Do you want multi-tenancy? Do you want, there are many, many things in the options. And rewriting the whole customize overlays and all the logic that's in Go in Terraform, no one will do that. Terraform is not capable of doing that kind of stuff. So that's why I'm asking if you can import the Golang package.
If we write I don't know if you can do it just like without a provider, but we could in theory write a provider that exports like a data source, and then you basically give the data source all your options, and it out as an output parameter, it just gives you the manifest as a string, and then we could just import the install package and do it that way. That's actually an option. And now, when with Terraform 13 and there's the whole registry hub dealing with external or third-party providers isn't as big of a deal anymore. So that actually, because I've myself written there is a beta provider that was going to simplify the Kubernetes, like creating Kubernetes manifest in Terraform by basically adding like an HCL compatibility layer, but that's like, it hasn't really happened anything in like half a year, so I'm not expecting that to be available anytime soon. So this might actually be a good option in that, if that's the case. But basically, this is the Go2K Terraform provider that gives you the manifests to install.
Cool. Yeah, if we can do that by reusing the package, that would be great. If we need to write the whole thing in Terraform from scratch, no one on the team will maintain such a thing.
Yeah, it'd almost be better at that point to make a Helm chart and then use some sort of Terraform Helm thing.
Yeah,
but I'm not really suggesting that either. I mean, that would be equally a nightmare, but well, not a nightmare, but a burden. But at least it would be kind of standard.
No, we cannot distribute the toolkit as a chart because Helm upgrade doesn't upgrade CRDs. So the moment we change anything in our API, after you do an upgrade, it will break everything. The CRD you'll end up with the old CRD and the new controller.
Okay. Well, I was just using Helm as a stand-in for, whatever standard way of doing things, installing packages. Maybe there isn't one with Terraform. I mean, maybe there isn't one.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there is a Terraform provider that can do Helm install and Helm upgrade, but we can not use that. We need a kubectl provider that.
Yeah, right.
Some YAML. That's it.
A raw manifests or customizations. Yeah, got it.
But I can try, if I have some time over, I can look at just writing a quick provider that does this data source, and I can see if validates if it's even a reasonable solution.
Yeah, that will be great, because every time we change something in our Bootstrap or whatever logic, it will be in that package. So we don't, you just update your Terraform provider to fetch the new install package from toolkit, and it will use the latest stuff. And I think that's the ideal approach, where we don't duplicate the whole logic anywhere else. And from there, after you have the manifest, then you can do whatever. You can generate, I don't know, GitLab repos with the GitLab Terraform provider, set up deploy keys, do whatever you want, or Pulumi, or whatever else you want. I also have to look into if Pulumi can import a Golang package. But
Well,
yeah,
isn't Pulumi, does Pulumi integrate with Terraform now?
no, Pulumi is a different option to Terraform. It's a competitor. They do the same stuff.
Okay. I remember correctly, there was some sort of compatibility layer somebody had built during the summer. I might be dreaming. Yeah, there's a TF2 Pulumi that converts Terraform to Pulumi.
Yeah, we don't want that. Pulumi has support for Go, so Pulumi should be able to import the package.
Okay, yeah.
But yeah, I think we should deal with this at some point and allow people to bootstrap the whole thing from without the CLI and without manual steps. Like if they want to automate it, they should be able to do it, and we have to find a way to make that possible without losing all the options. Like I want ARM nodes or I want whatever other setting we offer through the toolkit.
Yeah. No, but I totally agree with importing the module. So I think it's a good first step as an alternative that still uses the CLI components to do a data source in Terraform and just see how it works out.
Great, thank you.
You're talking about governance next?
Yep.
Yeah, I just briefly wanted to bring it up. I've seen that you all took a look at it. Just wanted to hear what is everyone's gut feeling. How close do you feel the proposal is at this point, or are there any big things that still need to change?
So I was waiting until after the weekend for some sort of dust to settle a bit. And then I had a look, and then I had a discussion with Scott about it. But just to kind of summarize what that discussion was, I think at present it's quite heavyweight, as in there's quite a few teams. Probably all those teams will pretty much have the same members. So you, in a way, you're just sort of creating work for people. So I think that the sort of balance between addressing separate concerns in the sense of, community is separate from security, is separate from overall governance. There's a balance between that and just creating a lot of structure that doesn't really need to be there because it's all the same people doing it. And by the way, we already have the values of transparency, openness, and whatever the other one that I can't remember. So that we don't really need to create teams for sort of reporting or even really making decisions that are being made elsewhere. We just need to respect those values of openness, transparency, and talk about things in the open and on the mailing list and in the discussions and so on. So that brings me to the second thing that I'm a bit quite hesitant about, and that is having an architecture group. Because I think those decisions should be made in the repos and in discussions in the open by everyone that feels they have a stake, and not by small number of people. And that's where there is a, you could say community and security are kind of separate concerns from developing the bits that have code. But architecture is not a separate concern from developing the bits that have code. So I see that as giving rise to conflict that doesn't really need to be there. So yeah, in summary, I think it's a little bit heavy at present, too many teams. a little too much bureaucracy, and secondly, I don't think there's a reason to have an architecture team. But that's a sort of nuanced thing. Like if there are a bunch of repositories that are very closely related, right? The Flux v2 / GitOps toolkit stuff. So it might be reasonable to constitute a team that is basically the maintainers of those repos and owns those repos, because they all sort of change at the same time. So I'm not against that. I'm just against having an overall architecture team that's sort of pushing decisions down into other repos.
Would you feel more comfortable looking at the architecture team if it was like a defined body who basically deals with like conflict resolution? I mean, this is probably all pretty far into the future, because right now it's mostly the three of you, and then there's a couple of Go-Git providers people and a couple of other maintainers. But do you think that if it was like a conflict resolution group, or, you know, just imagining a case where, you know, some people felt they hadn't been heard and somebody needs to resolve the conflict somehow?
Yeah, but that's what the org team is for, right? So
the org team, right. Okay.
If people feel like they haven't had a hearing and that another people doing something else are not being open, transparent, and the other value that I can't remember, then that should be raised with the org team, because that's the values, and that it's up to them to protect those, if you like. So it becomes, what I'm saying is that the way decisions get made is already taken care of. And if there is a conflict in that is not a technical thing anymore. That gets escalated to being an organizational thing, because now you are your conflict, if you like, is that someone is not listening and taking account of your point of view and being inclusive and that sort of stuff. So it's now an organizational issue. So the conflict resolution should go to the org team, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah, and regarding I'm just asking questions because I didn't write the proposal, just to see what still needs to be done. And regarding your other question, do you feel if we were to, you know, aspire to this proposal, like starting from a more, you know, organic, like evolving more organically towards this, do you think that would make more sense? Because you said it's quite heavy right now, and yeah, maybe a bit much at present.
Well, I think I can see a place, and maybe there's a bit of room to grow into with, say, having security and community teams, right? Because those plausibly could have different people on them that are from the sort of maintainers of the core stuff at present, rather than just being another meeting for the same people, right? And they would own different bits. Other teams that might exist don't really have a reason to exist yet. Not that there are a lot of other teams proposed, but yeah, I mean, I think it's worth planning for a bit of growth. But all the rules are there already for more structure to be created when it's needed. So it's more about accommodating, you know, what we might think will be the case in the next 6 months or something, or when we get it into incubation when that happens, and not about planning forever.
How does everyone else feel? about this? Any more thoughts?
I commented on the issue on the pull request in regards to what Michael said. I feel like we should have a dev team for the sole purpose of people being able to list the Flux CD org under their profile. I think we should definitely allow them to do that. The dev team, in my mind, doesn't have any kind of role besides if you are a maintainer, no matter on which project, you'll be part of the dev team and you can make your membership public and be proud that you are part of this project.
Yep, I'm not against that. Just to as a parenthesis, I'm not against that. I don't think it needs to be mentioned in the governance doc though.
Oh, yeah. Cool. Right.
And would this only be for maintainers?
You have collaborators.
You have a problem with your mic, Daniel. You'll see on the recording. You have the voice from the Saw movie.
I haven't seen that, but I can imagine.
You don't want to see it.
Daniel asked, is it just for maintainers? Or would we have like, yeah. So as on the chat, or would we include like people who we invite as collaborators into the thing? I mean, I think anyone that is invited as an outside collaborator or whatever is essentially a maintainer, you know, lowercase m if you like. Someone who's there because they are making a consistent contribution. So right. I wouldn't have anything against including them in the dev team so that there is the effect of they belong to the org. But
yeah, so let's say we have a project, I don't know, notification controller. Philip made a lot of contributions to that controller, so we vote for Philip to be a maintainer of that particular project. Once the pull request where Philip is added to the maintainer file, once that is merged, we'll invite Philip to the dev team, and that's the end of thing. If I don't know, you get removed from all the projects, then someone has to, I don't know, we could write a script or something to tell us, hey, you should remove this particular person because we cannot find it anywhere in no maintainers file. That's it.
But from the point of view of it being a sort of, not quite a cosmetic thing, but it being, you know, here is everyone inside the tent. I think we can even be pretty sloppy about that because it's not, doesn't really cost us anything. There's no particular downside to people being inside the dev team and being able to say, I'm part of this org.
As long as you don't tie any permissions to your team,
right, exactly.
GitHub. And that is why I think it should be recorded in the governance doc, because the fact that it exists and that it's a group of people you can accidentally assign rights to, or I don't know,
yeah,
some way fuck up the whole thing. That means that it should be recorded in the governance doc because it's part of your organization structure.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. So you could have it in a sentence, you know, the devs team is all the people that, whatever it is, but has no decision-making or permissions above what individuals have.
Yes, you basically strip them from rights, so to say, or scope their rights to the projects they maintain, and then the projects they maintain is the projects they're stated maintainers for, which is mentioned in the maintainer swap. Yeah.
Yeah, which I mean that's sort of how it is now, which is I like it like that. So I'm happy to maintain status quo for that.
Okay, so we can define in the governance doc that we have a dev team, and the members of the dev team are collected from each maintainer's file, from all the repos inside the organization, and the dev team has no further rights or role or access beyond that. That's its whole purpose. of having all the maintainers from all the repos in a single place. So I don't know, people can look at the Flux CD org on GitHub, click on the dev team and see everybody. And once you are there, you can display the org on your own profile. I think one phrase about the dev team should be enough for the governance file. Just to state that the dev team has no particular role beyond the collection of maintainers. Are you okay with that, Michael?
Yeah, seems completely reasonable to me. Yeah.
Cool.
Hida, I know you, the architecture team was in part motivated by some comments you made, or some changes you made. What's your position on whether it needs to exist beyond just individual maintainer teams?
Well, I get your point about not governing side projects, like, for example, the Go-Git providers library we have. The main reason I thought about introducing it is because of the closely coupled components we have. And the fact that we also maintain, I'm not sure what the word for it is again, but the fact that if no one says something shouldn't be done, then it can be done. That's something that's stated in the maintainers file or in the governance file, right? So to protect components from running into each other much later after something has already been merged and introduced, there should be someone or a bunch of people who have a more overall knowledge over all the components in the, well, let's call it the GitOps toolkit kind of ecosystem thing, to guard against
sort of
things
accidentally creating problems for other.
Yes, and I think having something like that in place, maybe it shouldn't be a team, or maybe it should, I don't know. But so I think it's very smart to state it in the file, because by doing that, you create the rule that some people are responsible for something. And with a responsibility comes an expectation. And that means that from a governance point of view, you have at least something to hold on against.
Yeah. Yep. No, I get that. I'm thinking you almost want to, in part, this is sort of a development process thing. And what I mean by that is you want to slow down certain kinds of decisions so that people have time to, adjust their own things or react to it, or to put their hand up and say, whoa, this isn't going to work for me, right? So, and that's above and beyond just the normal sort of openness and transparency and so on. I don't know if that belongs in a governance document, although I'm not trying to say your position is it should be in the governance document. You are just saying there should be some structure where that lives.
Yes.
That sort of venue for that happening.
Yeah, then another point I had, because your point was that a lot of the tasks could be performed by the organization team. And I think if we grow, and if we want to grow, right, in the end, the organization team will not consist of mainly technical maintainers, but also, for example, community people or marketing people or whatever other tasks they perform for the Flux organization as a whole. And that means that the amount of people that can perform certain tasks from an organization team point of view is a subset of the people in the organization team.
Right, but I don't think the organization team should be doing any technical stuff. They should just be there as the point of escalation for conflicts, to be able to judge whether.
But if you are talking about creating a new repository,
are doing the right thing.
Sometimes it doesn't make sense to create a new repository for something that's very small, or because there's a kind of maintenance load that comes with it. So that's a technical decision.
And you're saying that rests with the org team for now?
Yes. If you take back the the team I introduced, so the architecture team, then making the decision if the repository should be created or shouldn't be created or belong
They
somewhere
have
else.
to rest with someone.
Yes.
Yeah, I can kind of, I see that. Yeah, that specific thing, I don't know where that should rest. I mean, it seems like people should just be able to do that in a way. Like if, well, kind of, not at random.
Yes, exactly.
But I get what you mean.
You need to have a kind of doorstop for, well, I don't know. I'm not sure if it belongs in governance. Maybe it's kind of a policy or a checklist. If
yeah.
But we have no other place at the moment to record it, so this is the first step. But if we don't include it there, then the next step should be, okay, we need to bring policies in place for stuff that we took out.
It needs to be a sort of a flowchart thing. You know, is this adopting someone else's library, or is this you know, creating a new thing and not of much consequence? It's just, you know, a separate repo for the sake of it's easier to automate or something, or is this creating a whole new thing? And, you know, these are different decisions, right? And we might have different policies that mean that you can just do some of them, and that other things require a high-level decision. But yeah, good point, Hida, about that kind of decision needing to have a venue. Maybe the idea would be, or part of the charter of someone would be to come up with that policy, and then the org team is just there to enforce it, if you like. You know, if someone disputes that it's been followed.
I'm going to have another round of thinking, and when I will comment on the PR later.
Cool. I mean, I guess I would say I am not against having a technical oversight committee that is just for that sort of decision and is very, very kind of rigidly constrained in what they can actually say. Like it's really just there to make that kind of decision, right? To come up with that policy and then enforce it. Yeah.
I think maybe some of the words that were put into the document weren't as carefully put. We already put a lot of thought into them. Like we tried to be explicit that it shouldn't be a downwards force enforcing stuff that people below didn't agree upon. So maybe we should take some things out and reformat it into something about policies, so that it doesn't imply that decisions are being taken there and then forced upon well, the dev team. But I'm going to talk with Scott tonight and see if we can come up with something.
If it is just a case of coming up with policy, I think actually that could rest with the org team.
Yeah. Maybe.
Yeah.
We'll see. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Yes, please do have another chat with Scott and have another look over it. I think our deadline is kind of winding down, but of course we can extend it if we really want to. If we're still making changes on the eve of merging it, then we should probably just bump it out another week or something. Okay. Daniel, do you want to quickly mention the thing that you chatted about? Or is your microphone not working? Shall I say it? So, yeah. So there is a GitOps toolkit walkthrough that Lee's doing, I think, on October the 19th at 6 o'clock GMT +1. So that's probably 7 o'clock or even 8 o'clock for Stefan, I think, possibly. Yeah. Anyway, that's on the October 19th. It is in the meeting notes, if you need to refer back to that.
It's also in the README, on the main README of the toolkit.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, and it's there.
We decided to create 2 sections there in the README, featured talks, and we added all the talks we had on the toolkit so far. I think you did one and it's not there. I don't know if it's a YouTube video or you did an interview, right, Michael?
Me, yeah, I did an interview, but it's not published yet. It's published later this month, 28th, I think.
When it's published, would you please add it to the...
Yeah, trying to remember. Yeah. It's 28th. I'll tell you what, I'll put it in my calendar because I think that's when it's going out.
Yeah,
it's someone else's podcast, basically.
Yeah, so we are trying to maintain a list of all the talks, demos we have on the toolkit so far, and we also have a list with things that are in the future, like meetups or other events. We'll
It's a great idea.
Try to update that and keep track of it. And I envision that at some point on the Flux website, we'll have a dedicated page where we can put there third-party blog posts, talks, all things around Flux V2. We didn't do that for V1, and yeah, at some point I remember there was a talk for a particular subject. I wanted to give the link to a person for that, but I couldn't find it. So I think it's great if we bundle them together.
I'm working on the new website, or have been for the past couple of days, and there's a resource section there which is excellent for highlighting talks and other resources. So it will have a place soon.
Cool. So you can take the 2 sections from the README and just to have there on that page when we publish a draft for the website.
Yes, will do.
Thank you.
Can I, if it's okay, if I just take a minute? Even I know it's past 1 now, but I just want to give a quick update. So I've been I sat Friday night a bit with GoGit and getting it working with Azure DevOps. I kind of broke it down into figuring out that basically we need to add multi-act support for it to work. And actually so multi-act kind of doesn't make a difference until you have a larger amount of Git history. So I've managed to kind of cheat my way through and actually get GoGit to clone a repository from Azure DevOps, as long as there are very few commits. I kind of know why the upload pack thing does not work, and that has to do with how Git v1 and Git v2 responds to the upload pack message. So that's a fun history. But worst case scenario, I think I just have to implement multi-act into GoGit. I'm kind of just doing this on my free time because I can't really justify this for work. So it will happen when it happens. It mostly depends on how much I can muster out after work. But yeah, it's looking bright right now to be able to get Azure DevOps working soon with GoGit.
That's fantastic news.
Great news, Philip.
Yeah,
I
just don't
sorry
know.
We didn't make room in the main agenda for that.
No, that's fine. That's fine. It was just I just got some progress done last night, so I just wanted to update, give it just a quick update. I'll if I actually get something working properly, I'll make sure to add it to the agenda notes beforehand.
Very cool. I wonder if we sort of demonstrate a bit of a foothold on it, then maybe other people will go, oh, maybe this isn't so hard, and help out. That's always the wish, isn't it, in open source? It doesn't always happen. But...
Given it has been pending for about 3 years.
The thing is, I understand why people are afraid of it, because just reading through the technical specification of Git, and it's actually like the Git wire protocol, it gets kind of scary, I must say. But yeah, so as long as you don't have too many commits in the Git repo we're cloning from, I think it should work right now at least. So always just force push and just keep it to a single init commit, and it works.
Yeah, that's right. We just change the definition of GitOps so that it's always a single commit.
Always force push and erase history.
Yeah, exactly. Just constantly rebase everything on squash it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks for that update, Philip.
Yeah. Great.
All right. So Daniel is muted. Before. So shall I wind up? Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.